There's a group of parents who take the mini-me approach to parenting. They're control freaks who treat their kids like they own them, doing things like dressing up the entire family in matching outfits on a random Saturday, or mapping out every single detail of their kids' lives, beginning with what college they'll attend, what law firm they'll work out, while they're still stinking up their diapers. Now, I promise you there's another approach, a more unconventional approach to parenting. One that doesn't protect your kid against every hardship and helps them build resilience and grit. One that focuses on parents not passing their own issues down to their kids, and an approach that encourages social contribution from a very young age. And in this episode of the Examine Life podcast, I'm joined by Ted and Franzi Gonder. They're entrepreneurs, coaches, and global citizens, and two of the most intentional parents that I know. I promise you this conversation will change the way you approach parenting. But before we jump in, if you are an ambitious and driven parent who struggles with the tension of growing your career and how you show up with the parent, join one of our coaching cohorts at radreads.co/coaching, where you'll meet like-minded professionals looking to build a healthier relationship to ambition. Now, on to the episode. I wanted to read a quote. It's from a tweet of Ted's, and I want you to take me back into this moment. And the quote says, "Be the parent that has the slowest heartbeat, the most relaxed body, the emptiest mind. Be this so you can co-regulate your children." I'd love for you to paint the picture of why did you say that? What was happening? Where were you?
Well, that quote and that tweet actually originated from a WhatsApp message that I sent to our extended family. We have like a WhatsApp channel for us and each set of parents and a couple aunts. And I posted that one of our children had had a really emotionally intense day at school. He had learned some big lessons in a hard way. And when he came home in the middle of the day, we had a couple of options, right? We could either be highly reactive and react to what his teachers said or what we heard about what happened, or we could meet him from a calm, grounded place where we were able to receive him fully and just drop in with him into what he was feeling, and then just process it together. And it turned out that afternoon, both of us were able to be present. We took him to the forest. We went for a walk with him. He got a lot of feelings out. There was a lot of crying, a lot of hugs. And on the other side of it, we were certain that he'd learned what he needed to learn that day. No punishment was required, no yelling, no discipline, no grounding, none of the things that perhaps our parents or other parents we've known in our lives or conventional parents would have done. None of that was required. And I think my biggest reflection coming out of that experience was just that, wow, we've, as a couple, as parents, as individuals, we're not perfect, but one of the things we've done is spent a lot of time and energy figuring out how to relax our nervous systems and be more present and grounded and calmer. And that was one of the first moments for me as a parent where it was really evident that that is paying off.
Beautiful. I love how you also wrote in that tweet, how can I show up for my kids in a non-stressed state, which kind of, aligns with this kind of emotional regulation and this way of showing up. So we were going to talk about unconventional parenting. And before we started recording, we weren't sure if that was the right word. So let me ask you point blank. Do you view yourself as an unconventional set of parents?
Yes and no. If unconventional means tuned into our collective nervous system as a family. And if it means to kind of like consciously make a few decisions that may go against sort of like what we know to be true in society, then sure, that might be a bit unconventional. I think we've both done a lot of work on understanding our own nervous system and how we come across to each other, and it's obviously a big part of my work. Not just working with but also healing nervous systems, and working with people who like suffered extreme burnouts, or who go through like very big growth spurts and kind of like don't have the capacity to hold it all. So I think it was only natural for us to bring that into our family unit, because raising 3 boys is a whole lot. Like it's
You think?
it's a lot. Like our kids have a shit ton of energy all the time. It starts at 5:30 a.m. and it goes until like 9 p.m. and it just like goes, right? And they have really bold characters, all of them. And like I think just leaning into that and understanding like who are we in this and how are we enabling them to become who they need to be without halting them, without like setting up a bunch of rules that they need to follow, but really just sort of like making them aware of how it impacts others, right? How it makes me feel, how it makes others feel, all of that kind of stuff. We spend a lot of time doing practices and talking to our
Right.
children about that. We have a lot of like tools that we're using with
And
our kids on a daily basis of just regulating our family, hyping ourselves up, owning our weaknesses, um, you know, um, loving adventures even though they're hard, how to do the hard things without feeling kind of like desperate about it, um, all of that stuff. So we recently moved to Portugal for that exact reason, because we felt like that where we were, um, and the education system that we were exposed to on top of it was really kind of like dimming the light that our kids could not just experience, but like find within themselves.
mm,
Uh, And so,
Beautiful.
yeah,
Wow.
I think that is maybe a bit unconventional.
moves to a new country.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love this. This is going to give us a lot to work with. You said earlier something along the lines of doing something that is not on the traditional
Yeah.
path. I'm paraphrasing, but something to do with like the traditional path of society. Can you speak of an example that comes to mind, or that's the most salient around, society typically expects
Yeah.
it to be this way, and you've chosen to do it
Do
that way?
you want to chime in? Or
Well, when you were speaking before, this is so small and kind of random, but one thing that came to mind for me, that as I've seen other parents for 8 years and reflected on my childhood and reflected on how I probably would have parented if I hadn't met you or hadn't had other experiences, read certain books, is what to do when your child is having a hard moment, how to soothe them. It is easier than ever to soothe an upset child. Hand them candy, give them, I don't know, French fries,
or a device.
or give them a screen, right? And there are emergency situations where I also hand our child a piece of candy or give him a screen, but it's very rare that I would do this in a moment where what they need to learn is either the ability to self-soothe, or what they need is co-regulation with a parent. I had this a couple days ago where my instinct, well, I don't know if it's really an instinct, it's not in my DNA, but my initial impulse, our 4-year-old was upset about something. I don't remember what it was. Something happened with his action figure, his Iron Man figure, and he was upset about it, and logic wasn't working. He was just kind of slowly losing his grip on emotion. And was pacing around the kitchen, starts yelling at me about this, and starts crying. And I thought, man, I don't like being yelled at. I have so many other things that I'd rather be doing. Like my mind was pulling me out of the situation. And then I thought, well, how can I get him to quiet down and calm down? Maybe I could give him some candy, or maybe I could give him a video game. And then I stopped myself, which is now pretty habitual in these situations. I stopped myself and I said, he just needs a hug and some fresh air. And I picked him up and talked about something completely unrelated, and then pointed into the clouds. Which animal do you see? Oh, I see an animal in the cloud. He's like, where? And then all of his tears dried up. It was as if he had not been upset 60 seconds earlier. And his heartbeat and my heartbeat were connected, and we were outside breathing fresh air, looking out at our neighborhood, and that's all he needed. But if I had handed him candy or a screen in that moment, it would have programmed him to want those things, or to want instant soothing, instant distraction anytime he feels uncomfortable emotions. And that's where I think probably for a lot of kids, ADHD starts, and that's where addiction starts for a lot of adults. So if you want to bulletproof your kids against mental health ailments downstream, well, probably one of the first things you can do is just pause and take a deep breath and look at your child when they're having a hard time and ask, what do they really need? Maybe they just need me.
I think just to add to that, a lot of, and I remember this all the time, one of my mentors used to say, adults learn through repetition and practice and, certain tools. Kids learn through play. And they also learn to regulate themselves through play. And because our kids play less than ever, really, right? I think it's also because kids have such a hard time regulating themselves these days. And so one of the things that we do, this was one of our sort of default parenting things that we agreed upon very early on with our first child, is we get out no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
So no matter what the weather is, no matter how long it takes to dress the kids, right? There was a time where we had a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a
1-year-old,
and a 1-year-old, and it was just bonkers in our home, right? It was
mid-pandemic.
No help. It was absolute bananas. And we just, no matter what the weather was, no matter how many layers they needed, we would always get out, always. And this is the kids still. Up until we were at the skate park the other day, and our son said, I feel like spending my entire day outside. I feel good here. I feel good with fresh air. And so it's starting to seep in, because they find that with fresh air and connected time together and having fun, there is a sense of regulation. The moment there's play involved, we all just get into flow with each other. And so that has been super powerful in our home. It's very basic. I don't find that's very rocket sciencey, but it made a huge difference for us, and it released us of so much pressure in our parenting too, of always needing to do certain things or perform a certain way or whatever it is. I think we, there's also, we're in this, the millennials, right? They're always in this sort of what else can we do as parents to make better? How do we not fuck up our children? How do we make sure they're not traumatized? We have all of those thoughts, right? Get outside, spend time with your shit, be connected, right? Have fun, share a snack, exchange a hug, right? Like, have an honest conversation, right? Like all of those kind of things, like come back
Yeah.
to the basics.
I thank you for sharing. I mean, I think that I approach parenting quite consciously as well and unconventionally. But I learned a lot from what the two of you have just shared, especially in
Mhm.
the going outside. We live in LA and we kind of get in so there's no excuse I mean, everyone's staying indoors today because of the rain. It's like drizzling outside. And it happens like 3 days a year. So there's no excuse. And I'll come back to that. But I wanted to ask, either one of you, you mentioned that moment where kind of kids have meltdowns for no reason, right?
Yeah.
An Iron Man that's, whose
Yeah.
head's broken or what have you. Um, I would love to ask, how would one of your parents, if you were the child in that situation, and if you're comfortable sharing
Totally.
this on a public podcast, how would one of your parents have responded to that
I feel very
situation?
comfortable sharing that. I've done a lot of work on that. So I feel very good about it. Um, I had two very different parents. I had a like overly caring mother, like almost to an extent where she would give up her entire sense of self for her children, and a fairly dominant, authoritarian, partially narcissistic father. Um, I experienced everything on the sort of like continuum of like, you know, very caring parenting to very authoritarian, demanding parenting. I remember my mother, who I need to say this, love dearly, and she's literally like the most important person in my life. So there's nothing bad about it. And I talked to her about it many times, but like there's a lot that she carried throughout her own childhood that made her so overly protective around us that no matter what we did, it was always okay. Um, there was a lot of times where she would just, always just try to help, soothe, facilitate, navigate, mediate, like, and there were moments where I felt like she was just getting in the way, of me having a hard time even, right? Or she telling me that it's okay to have a hard time. Like, I think sometimes I just would have needed to have like permission to almost feel the fucking big feelings, the really big core emotions, and someone just holding me in that. But trying to fix it is not trying to fix it all the time is not the solution. We don't establish our ventral vagal brake, like the sort of like ability in our nervous system to come back into homeostasis. Um, if we consistently are being facilitated to just be happy, be positive, be okay, right? And so,
Yeah.
my mom did a lot of things very right. That part, not so much. Um, and it's because she never learned it herself. And she had to invent a lot of
Yeah.
like the parenting that she exposed us to because she doesn't come from a childhood that was safe at all. Um, and then I had my dad, who was sort of like on the bandwagon of like making me the most independent, self-reliant, non-attached human on the entire planet. And so that didn't happen at all either because first of all, it was complete opposite of what I heard from my mom. And they were divorced fairly early, so like that didn't help. Um, and so there was a lot of like uh pushing through, go do it, nothing is enough. Um, you know, who do you think you are when you do certain things? Me just kind of trying to experience what it means to be a child, a teenager, right? Like I had no idea what was right or wrong. Like I was just trying to figure out what this thing called life is. Um, so being held in ambiguity, navigating ambiguity with a parent, um, how emotionally complex it sometimes can be. Something that Ted and I make a really big deal about is being relatable as parents. Ted is extremely good at that, actually. Like he can make an entire fool of himself by saying, like, "Here's what happened to me when I was 8 years old," right? And just showing our kids that we're just as messy as they are, and that part of life is
Mm.
allowing that messiness and rising from it and having fun with it, and also finding resilience in
Mm.
it. And right, I
Yeah.
talk a lot about belonging, safety, and dignity in my work. Um, and if I would say, if you would ask me, like, what are some of the core ingredients for like the parenting that we've chosen, it's belonging, safety, and dignity. Like that, because of where I come from.
Mm.
I want to come back to that, but I want to first say, as I'm listening to you, thank you for sharing the story, telling
Mhm.
us about your parents. There is this and then you mentioned how millennial parents are, trying to perfectly orchestrate the idyllic
Yeah.
childhood for their own kids. There's a part of me that goes back to this saying, which is like, every parent, our parents were always just trying to do their best, right? And there is this, you know, I, you sharing your mom and your father's parenting style. It was like, well, they saw a world, and in that world there
That,
was a vision, my words not theirs, of how
yeah.
you would show up or be in that world. And obviously it's like, well, if you wear red glasses, you're going to see that the world
Yeah.
is very red, and so everything will be
Yeah.
biased towards red. And if you wear green glasses, everything's going to be biased towards green. But you might also go your entire life not knowing that you
Right.
were wearing red glasses.
That's it.
And so I wonder, it's a bit of an open question, but what I'm hearing you say, and where we're very aligned on, is like, you have to do the work as parents, you have to do the work, and we could say what the work is,
Mhm.
on yourself. And so, but at the same, there's like not a cynic in me, but there's an asterisk in me, is like, sometimes, like, is there it's like trying too hard. It's like trying too hard to be
Yes.
creative. Like your creativity ends up
Absolutely.
backfiring. And so there's a lot of questions in one here, but how do you think of the element of, you've got to do work on yourself to kind of unpack those biases? And then the second is like, even when
Right.
you unpack things, like, our kids are probably going to be sitting in the therapist chair,
Yep.
and be like, God, my dad was so obsessed with like working on himself that it just gave me this complex about, like, I'm not doing enough
Mm.
work on myself. Right.
Wow. There's so much there.
I have so much to say, but I can sense there's something coming through you.
I'll try to. You start.
That's how it goes. So I'll start with the kind of like one thing that I say to myself a lot is that I have to be okay as a parent to not be okay and not be perfect to a degree where I am totally okay that my kids will experience some form of mini trauma, slow trauma, um, because of what I've done. The difference,
Mm.
uh, simply because we're imperfect, right? The difference,
Yeah.
I think, is, and when I then think about the way I grew up, is the difference is I'm very willing to apologize. I've
Mm.
never witnessed my parents apologizing for pretty much anything, especially my father. And he passed in 2013, and it's one of those things that has led to a lot of pain in my life. Um, Never, not even not hearing "and I love you" or like "I'm proud of you" or anything like that, which I think a lot of us kind of like crave, for those who haven't heard it. But also just sort of like, "I'm sorry for X, Y, and Z." Kind of like
Mm.
noticing that he reflected, realized that that wasn't so cool, and then being like, "You know what? I was a little fast there. I'm sorry about that." And so
Mm.
it's something that I do frequently and very willingly. Um,
Mm.
and then also later on, I think about that a lot too. Later on, being okay with explaining certain things of how they came about. Something that Ted and I do is we record twice a year we record videos for our kids to walk them through sort of like the months that what has happened and how they have developed and how we felt, and we're going to give it to them once our youngest is 18. And
we say sorry in real time.
yeah. And so if there are things that we feel like we haven't mastered as parents in that moment, and we say that, but it's really so that they can, if there's anything that ever comes up where they feel like there's an open loop, right? There's like something that doesn't settle for them, and then they hear those videos, they're like, shit, they thought about that too. They see it too. So that there's closure on a sort of like system level basis, right? We're just trying to be intentional. We don't know if it's going to work, but we're willing to be intentional and creative about it. Those are like two things that are immediately coming up for me.
I think there's a phrase that I always assume people have heard, but every time I say it, people are like, "Oh, what's that?" And the phrase is intergenerational trauma. And you're better at explaining it, but I'll try. The idea is basically that parents 4 generations ago didn't know that hitting your kids has adverse outcomes. Then parents 3 generations ago tried to hit their kids less, but didn't know that alcoholism has adverse outcomes. And parents 2 generations ago, right? So you get like, and then you get to our parents' generation, and they're like the children of the post-war generation. They're carrying what they were given, and only in the last 1 or 2 generations do we have like widespread economic breakthroughs in terms of quality of life, ability to, I don't know, like go to a decent school and like not go to bed hungry. And like a lot of people still do go to bed hungry. A lot of people still do have economic uncertainty, but like broadly speaking, our generation is better off than a lot of generations before us, right? Our parents, immigrant parents, for example, is a great example. Like worked super hard so that we could have the opportunities they didn't have. Now we end up the overprogrammed generation that like our kids now are addicted to phones or social media because they see us. The reason I bring this up, the idea of intergenerational trauma, is because because of the information revolution, we are kind of the first generation that has widespread awareness and access to things like self-healing, that like we're the first generation where therapy isn't stigmatized anymore as much, where you can say, I'm doing some work on myself and feel okay about it. And you can like read parenting books or go to a how to be a better parent circle or do these kinds of things or interact with someone on Twitter about like how to become a better parent. And this is like acceptable now. This never was true before. Like, and if it was completely underground and fragmented and one-off. So I think that I believe in the possibility for improvement from this moment forward. It's like a really powerful moment in parenting history because of that. Now, there are a lot of like cultural counterforces of modernity that are really detrimental and really formidable. Screen addiction, like candy at children's eye level in the checkout line everywhere you go. Social media, the sense of like mental isolation, skyrocketing suicide rates of teenagers. But
again, we have the tools available to us. To kind of like help our kids to become aware that is real, right? We talk to our children all the time. It's just sort of like, why the cereal box looks the way it does, right? Like this, don't shy away from like having those conversations with your kids.
Well, our 8-year-old is starting a YouTube channel, right? And we're not going to tell you the handle because we don't want him to get views. I'm joking, partially. But he's starting a YouTube channel, and we had the same conversation with him. YouTube is a company. YouTube knows that getting views and likes and comments can be addictive. It knows that
Well, he knows what dopamine is now, like, how the brain works and what
Look,
that needs.
they want you to keep coming back so you can make more videos so they make more money. Doesn't mean you shouldn't make videos. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use their tool to impact other people and teach them cool stuff that you like to talk about. But be aware.
Yeah. So a few sort of like things that we set up for him is said, no face, not your name, right? Like
Yeah.
it needs to be private, only family can know, and friends, right? Like those kind of things, right? But what we didn't want to do is push down his creative spirit by saying absolutely not.
Yeah.
And instead make him aware
Yeah.
that he should create for the sake of creation, right? For the sake of beauty, because he wants to put something in the world that is beautiful, but not for the sake of getting the likes. And so we talked about it for like 3
Yeah.
weeks before he started it, over and over and over again. He had to research it. We watched videos around it, all of that kind of stuff. And then he made his first video. And like in the first 2 weeks, he looked at his channel maybe 3 times and was just very happy that he had like 9 likes on one of the videos.
But he gets really hyped about making new videos, recording them,
Right, exactly.
posting them, shipping them.
Yeah. So that's the cool thing now. It's like he wants to learn more of he does crafty things on there. And so that's what he wants to learn about now, right? Because he tells his friends too. It's like, hey, did you know when you spend too much time on YouTube that you can get fat because he learned that that with the dopamine anyway that
I told his friend that his friend's gonna get diabetes from YouTube. That was the
that's what it was.
That was what was it was like a year or two ago.
Because you tend to eat more unconsciously, blah blah blah, right? Because he watched a movie around that stuff. So he, it's all about awareness. It's really all about awareness. And kids are so capable of absorbing information and digesting it in the way they need to. And even if they like the funny ones and the weird ones around, kind of like saying things that are a little bit like, what is he talking about? Right? Let that be. Let that be. It's okay.
I guess as I'm listening to you talk, I feel like one of the things that sets you apart from many parents that I know and interact with is that this kind of relationship that you have with control. And so I'll just share back a few things that I've heard you say throughout this conversation was, one is, we could have hours conversation about this, but it's like the control of feelings and emotions, and particularly bad, I'm using giant air quotes here because I don't believe there's bad emotions, but anger, sadness, frustration, envy, what have you. And so, earlier in the conversation, Ted had mentioned like, oh, if someone's feeling sad, like I can instantly make the sadness go away with, a piece of candy. Then, you're talking about the kind of observing the relationship, the intergenerational trauma that you've had with prior generations, and kind of bringing an awareness to that with your kids, but also giving them this kind of freedom to like find out who they are, right? And I think maybe what I'm trying to say is that like one thing that feels very refreshing in talking to you, but also scary at the same time, is that you kind of you apologize, you're accepting of this of being out of control of certain dimensions of parenting, where I suspect that many listeners are like, oh, my child's feeling sad. I want him, and I do it from a place of love, but I want the sadness to go away because, it gives me this element of control, controlling what's best for them.
Can I say something to that right away? I think this has emerged for us in really concrete ways, and also has been just like part of our own personal development journeys. The biggest breakthrough that I had on that was our kids are fully independent souls that come onto this planet with their own soul contract, their own reason to be here. And it is on me to guide them. It is on me to facilitate. But I don't own my children. I do not own my children. And if I want to give them the feeling that they have a certain level of responsibilities in their own life, then I have to make sure that I spoon feed that to them very early on. So if they want to earn money much earlier than I thought they ever needed money, right? Then they need to go figure out a way to earn that money. I'm here to facilitate that. I'm here to support that. I'm here to show up for it because I'm a dedicated mother and I want him to have that experience. But I'm not going to shy away from the fact that it's going to be hard for him. Because if there's one thing that I took away from my own life is that I was partially too sheltered or too exposed to the extremes of that. And it has left me feeling like I can't belong into a place where hard things happen. And I don't want that for them. I want them to be able to be like, this is fucking hard. Let me reach out to my parents or let me reach out to my friends and ask for help. But if I don't know what that feels like to do hard things and then kind of like, have that sense of like, oh, I remember when I first had that, my parents always helped with those things, right? Then they just won't know. So I have to, it's the same thing when you build a business, or it's the same thing when you go on a big adventure or something like that. You have to let go of a certain level of control in order for things to fully unfold. You always have to surrender to the experience more than to controlling the experience, because then it's not an experience, it's just like it's an event. It has a beginning and an end, and you kind of happen to be there. And I want my kids to experience life. I want them to be like fully damn present for all of the things.
Can I ask?
Yes,
can I
please.
interrupt with a coaching request for myself? So I see that, and so with my eldest, who's turning 10, we're already starting to see kind of the really like mean girl, social ostracization, like weird playground stuff. And there's always these moments where like we could like hop in and make one phone call to a parent and be like, this is not cool what your daughter's doing. And thankfully it hasn't gotten to that point there, but it will one day. And like, to me, there's this like delicate line of like, it could feel so painful in that moment. And I don't think, even as I say it out loud, I'm like, it's like not necessarily character defining. Maybe once it's not, but if it happens over and over and over again, it can be character defining in whatever direction. But like the temptation that's like, I don't want my daughter I know how hurtful whatever is happening in that moment can be, and I can actually make it stop in that moment, while also recognizing that if she never is exposed to that, it's gonna be a rough life if you're not exposed to that. And so, how do you talk yourself? I think, how would you talk yourself through a situation like that?
Well,
as a parent,
as a parent,
yeah.
Maybe we'll find our way to that answer, or you have an answer to it. But my prelude to whatever that emergent answer is that I have a really strong belief that the number one skill children growing up in 2024 need to learn is that change is going to be your only constant. The way technology, culture, media, society, everything is changing, it's just get so much faster than ever before. So the biggest skill that you can develop is the ability to adapt to change. And I think that's pretty different than even a generation ago. So the best way that we as parents can support that is to let our children experience really hard things, but then come home and process it in a totally safe, nurturing, supportive environment. And there are instances where I know I would intervene if there was serious bullying happening. Physical or cyber bullying, where like I felt like my child's welfare is in danger. Where I felt like no matter what I do, I put my kid in martial arts, I take my kid to a therapist, I do all the things, I get my kid cooler clothes, like I do whatever it takes, and he's still getting the shit kicked out of him, or still getting cyberbullied and ostracized after a month. I don't know how long. It depends on the situation, right? But then, I would absolutely intervene. But I think my like my first principle or first go-to in that situation would be, how can I strengthen my son? We only have sons so far. How can I strengthen my son in this situation to find his way?
And
And
I think it would reflect it back to you and say, what is your own relationship with conflict?
Straight to the dagger.
Come to request.
Straight to the heart.
And explore that for yourself, right? And kids are our mirrors, and especially firstborns always reflect the heck out of us, right? They reflect back every single thing that we haven't worked through. That's what I feel. My eldest is like a total mirror of like everything that I haven't processed yet.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you're
and
spot
so
on.
yeah,
You're
so
spot
I
on.
think I would probably just go there. And I know this is another unconventional probably element, but I think the future of schooling, right, coming back to like, where a lot of like the bullying and stuff like that happens. School is an extremely dysregulating place. So a lot of kids from a lot of different families with a lot of different values, right? So explaining that to your children, right? How kids process feelings differently depending on where they come from. And if you have the means, and this is really one of the reasons why we're here too, is choosing smaller school settings, choosing school settings where you share the values with other parents more coherently, and kind of like you're all looking at the world in a very similar way. It's extremely powerful, and we're witnessing it now. It's something that we've been longing for a very long time, and it's just like knowing that our kids are in an environment now where parents are thinking very similarly and working on similar values and ideas, trying to like teach kids very similar things, is so good for the soul of the parents, because it feels like you're not just holding the entire world always on our own. And I think this is one of the systemic issues in our society right now, is that as a parent, it has almost become a competitive sport to be the best parent in the world, right, among other parents. But we're not kind of like building those collectives anymore, where we're like, what do you really need? How are you really? What are you struggling with right now? How can I help? Right? I lead those women's circles in my work, and I also participate in some here. And just being heard and seen as a parent, and like the things that you're struggling with are so good, because we need to release what needs to be released in order to show up as a lighter, more enlightened, or more capacious person for our kids. So coming together as parents rather than continuing that competitive sport thing, I think is a big piece to me.
And I see that a lot in the U.S., right? Because like you have public schools where it's just so many different values, like set of parental values, and then you have private. But a lot of the private, especially the more expensive private schools, are around the values of having successful kids. So you're unified in that belief, but it's not these kind of
elitism,
soul-based values, right? So I guess we have time for one last question. I've been asking parents this question. If you think of, your kids when they leave the house, I don't know if that's like 18 or 21, the moment when you'll hand over, you said 18, you'll hand over you're in Europe, that hand over the videos to the boys. And you think back and you're like, we did, we raised some great kids. Like what attributes will you what attributes will you see in that kind of like, oh, like everything kind of goes as planned?
Well, since our eldest was born, basically, we've had a family manifesto and a family motto. And the family motto used to be, happy, healthy, and strong. So we'd be holding hands with him. He's 2 years old. Happy, healthy, strong. Happy, healthy, strong. And then a few years ago, we added kind. So these are simple values that we're able to practice every day, and now we do it almost. We should bring it back a little more explicitly, but there's.
We do family affirmations in the car almost every morning.
Yep.
So everybody gets to choose an affirmation, states it, and then we sing it together as a family. Then we put our hands together in the car, the driver not, obviously, and then we scream through the car, team family. So, like we're just really rallying for each other, with each other. We practice breathing with our kids, and that has been serving us well. We start off with like animal breathing, so it's more playful, right? Like, let's breathe like a lion, let's breathe like a penguin, like choose an animal, whatever it is. So we talk out to our kids a lot about body budgets. Have you slept enough? Have you eaten enough? Have you drank enough? Have you said what needs to be said? Are there emotions that you're not sharing with us so we can help you, right? So kind of like helping them to go through a roster of things to check off in order to, like, if something is off, they know if that's not it, then it's really substantial.
I think what all of this amounts to in terms of like what would qualify my parenting, what would satisfy me as a parent looking at my child as they're entering adulthood and going off to do their own stuff. I think for me, a big part of it is, are they able to manage their body and manage their psychology adequately so that they are able to be of service to the world around them, whether that means expressing their creative talents, whether that means going and doing something commercial in business, whether that means like doing social justice work and protesting for a cause they believe in. I don't really care what they do professionally, as long as they are able to be self-reliant enough in body and mind to be of service, to consistently, sustainably be of service to the people that they love in their life and themselves,
and maintain connection with themselves and others. I feel like in the time with like AI and like, I mean, all those like wild technologies moving to the forefront right now, right? And really disrupting our shared connection, togetherness in many ways, is like, I really believe that the ones who are able to maintain connection and use technology as an enabler of that, right, will be the ones that like really improve humanity, or like use technology for the sake of improving humanity, not exploiting it and staying in that consumer mindset. I want them to be producers, creators, enabling beauty, not just consuming it. So
nice ending there.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
so much. I really, really appreciate the conversation with you.
We appreciate
This was
you.
amazing.